How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill. Chapter 3, Controlled Attention. Hidden in the two words, controlled attention, is a strange power that is sufficient to remove all the ordinary self-imposed limitations which people accept, and by which they are bound throughout their lives. The power is literally mental dynamite, as it is capable of blasting the cause of self-imposed limitations, and giving one the means by which he may take charge of his own mind. When you master this chapter, you will understand more fully why one must have a definite major purpose in order to attain success. You will know, also, why one's definite major purpose should be written out, memorized, and repeated often. You will understand why one's mental attitude plays such an important part in carrying out the object of one's major purpose or any minor purpose. The subject of controlled attention is the basis of many sects and religions, although it may be called by other names. It has been the major weapon used by powerful military leaders, some of whom have not always made constructive use of it. Through this chapter we shall get a better understanding of the mastermind principle, the results of which have baffled men of science and astounded laymen who have witnessed its operations. The alliance of two or more minds, working in perfect harmony for the attainment of a definite purpose, has the effect of stimulating the mind of each person in the alliance, and results in providing the members of the alliance, or some individual in the group, with a source of knowledge that sometimes cannot be traced to the accumulated knowledge of any of the individuals. This result we are familiar with, because it is a result that is taking place in the research laboratories and the business and industrial councils throughout the world, almost as a daily routine. We see evidence on every hand that such a combination of minds gives men vision, courage, imagination, and initiative which they do not possess when they act independently and alone, and we know that this power is available even to men whose avowed purpose in its use is the destruction of the best that civilization has given the world. Andrew Carnegie included the principle of controlled attention as one of the principles of individual achievement, but even the great steel master failed to associate this principle with the means by which civilization may be advanced. He saw in it a power that is adaptable to one's needs in the solution of economic and personal problems of a material nature, but beyond this point he made no mention of its possibilities. Mr. Carnegie readily acknowledged that his huge fortune was accumulated solely through the efforts of a combination of minds consisting of some 20 men who were allied with him as a mastermind group, for the purpose of making and marketing steel. He acquired the technique necessary to induce those men to work with him in a spirit of harmony. He knew that the creative vision, imagination, initiative, and inspiration produced through this mastermind alliance were great, but he made no attempt to explain the source of the superpower they gave him. Since Mr. Carnegie first brought this principle to my attention, more than a quarter of a century of intense research into the causes of its power has been carried on. The minds of thousands of people have been explored, their reactions to thought stimuli have been examined, and conclusions have been reached which may be of the utmost importance to this and future generations, in the matter of adjustment of human relationships. Come with me now, for a brief elementary lesson in organic chemistry, for here is where we find the first convincing clue to what happens when two or more minds are blended, in a spirit of harmony, for the attainment of a single purpose. In chemistry, we learn that two or more elements of an entirely different nature can be so combined that they produce something different from either of the elements. For illustration, water, which is known in chemistry as H2O, is a compound consisting of 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen, but the result is neither oxygen nor hydrogen. This marrying of the elements produces an entirely new product. We also learn in chemistry that certain harmless drugs can be so compounded that they become deadly poisonous, while still other combinations of drugs, added to the poison, will neutralize its poisonous effect. Throughout nature we see that every atom of matter and every unit of energy is definitely modified by its nearest associates. Vegetation, the things that grow out of the ground, are definitely modified by the elements of the soil on which they feed, a fact that is well known to every farmer and every horticulturist. Yes, the atoms of matter are influenced by the presence of their neighbors, the same as people are. The world in which we live and the material portion of the universe which we can observe are made up of electrons, which, in final analysis, consist of positive and negative units of energy so arranged that the two forces balance each other and are practically inseparable by any method known to science. The material portion of the universe consists, as far as science has been able to determine the facts, of only two things, energy and matter. And it appears, if one wishes to be strictly technical in the statement of facts, that the so-called material portion of the universe is nothing but energy, since obviously the electrons of matter are known to be nothing but two opposing forms of energy, one pushing, and the other pulling, in such a manner as to neutralize their combined energy. Taking our cue from the chemistry of matter, we come, now, to the analysis of the power of thought. Obviously, thought is energy, and for all that science has learned about it, or its cause, it may be precisely the same sort of energy that holds the opposing forces of the electron together. If that is true, then it is clear that the energy of thought responds to the same modifying influences that change the nature of the elements of matter, one of which, as we have seen, is the manner in which the atoms of matter are combined. There are two facts of which we are sure. First, that the nature of matter can be changed by combining the elements of other matter, and second, that the nature of thought can be modified and changed by the alliance of two or more minds, and this despite the nature of the alliance, or for what purpose it is made. These are facts so well known, even to laymen, that they are readily accepted as such. We know that there are certain types of minds which, when they contact each other through any sort of intercourse, become definitely antagonistic to each other. In this circumstance we find a reasonable hypothesis for the belief that the chemistry of the brain and the chemistry of matter in other fields, are the same, that the same law of nature which changes harmless chemical elements into deadly poison, by the mere act of combining them, changes also the vibrations of thought, when mixed in certain combinations, to an antagonizing influence. In other words, there are certain combinations of thought energy which fight the moment they come into contact with each other. Nor is this fact demonstrable alone in the relationship of two or more individuals, it can also be seen in the operations of an individual mind, for it is well known that there are types of thought which repel as soon as they come together. The emotion of fear and the emotion of faith, for example, are so unfriendly that both cannot possibly occupy the brain at the same time. One or the other must, and it always does, dominate. There are certain means by which an individual may determine which of these two emotions, or any other emotions, shall dominate his brain, and one of the more important of these methods is controlled attention. As a part of this description I must now call attention to a law of nature through which like attracts like. We sometimes call this law the law of harmonious attraction. Through its operation things that are suited to one another, in the great scheme of life, have a natural tendency to get together. We see this law in operation in connection with vegetation that grows from the soil. Through some strange and unknown process this law manages to bring together the chemical elements of the soil and combine them with the units of energy of the elements of the air so as to produce every living thing that grows from the ground. Here there is no antagonism, no fighting, among the elements of matter or the units of energy. They do their work in response to the law of harmonious attraction, without opposition among themselves. When we come to the relationship between men, we find another situation through which the law of harmonious attraction is often disregarded, and unfriendly forces of thought energy break up relationships of harmony. Sometimes this happens because of man's ignorance of the law of harmonious attraction, sometimes it is the result of man's deliberate substitution of negative thoughts which are known to be destructive of the influence of the law of harmonious attraction. The person who has mastered this philosophy and has formed the habit of applying it in all his relationships with other people finds himself benefited by the law of harmonious attraction. He has conditioned his brain to attract to himself only such people and material things as he desires. Now let us see how he goes about the process of conditioning his brain so as to enable him to adapt himself to the influence of the law of harmonious attraction, viz. 1. Definiteness of purpose. He decides precisely what he wants, lays out a plan for acquiring it, and then proceeds to concentrate the major portion of his thoughts and deeds on that end, following his thoughts with appropriate physical action. Here, Then, enters the principle of controlled attention, and let us not overlook the fact that this has the effect of giving him the benefit of the law of harmonious attraction, in two different ways. First, he attracts the forces of a positive mental attitude which create harmony within his own mind. Second, he attracts people and material things which harmonize with the nature of his purpose. Through controlled attention, and by that method alone, may one impress the nature of his desires, aims, and plans upon his subconscious mind, where the law of harmonious attraction appears to find contact with them. 2. The master mind. Having made the first step in the development of the habit of controlled attention, by the adoption of a definite major purpose, he must form a mastermind alliance with others who have the necessary experience, education, native ability, and who have been supplied with the necessary motive, to help attain the object of his major purpose. This mastermind relationship intensifies the application of the principle of controlled attention, because the alliance creates a powerful, mass psychology which gives one increased self-reliance, imagination, enthusiasm, initiative, and the will to win. A man will keep on moving in the direction of his definite major purpose when he is associated with others who lend him aid and encouragement, whereas he would be inclined to slow down, and to divert his attention from his major objective, if he worked alone. The mastermind alliance, when it is keyed up and actively engaged in carrying out some definite objective, is controlled attention in its highest form. Such an alliance keeps one continuously reminded of his purpose in life, particularly where one is associated daily with the members of his mastermind group, as are the successful leaders of industrial and business organizations. 3. Applied faith. The man who has adopted a definite major purpose, and has surrounded himself with a group of other people, in a mastermind alliance, and is actively engaged in carrying out the object of his alliance, thereby demonstrates his faith in his ability to attain his objective. Therefore, the element of faith enters into his application of the principle of controlled attention, thus further intensifying his power of concentration. By the time this third step has been taken, in developing the habit of controlled attention, one's mental attitude has become predominantly positive, many of the self-imposed limitations of doubt and discouragement and lack of self-reliance have disappeared, one moves with definiteness in all he does, he has no room left in his mind for thoughts of failure. He is so busily engaged in carrying out the object of his major purpose that he has no time to hesitate or procrastinate, moreover, he has no desire to do so. The third step in the development of controlled attention would be sufficient to ensure success, in a majority of cases, but the master of this philosophy does not stop here. He proceeds to freeze the gains he has made by taking the fourth step. 4. Going the extra mile. The application of this principle ensures continuous action. It brings into operation the principle of increasing returns through which one's efforts are greatly multiplied. It creates an added momentum behind one's efforts which inspires both the individual and his mastermind associates, as well as others who are definitely related to the object of his definite major purpose. It also serves to modify his mental attitude by making it more positive. While it may not bring him direct material benefits on every occasion that this principle is applied, it has the general effect of creating goodwill and attracting the cooperation of others, in a spirit of friendliness. Thus it serves as fuel to feed the fire of controlled attention. But this is not the stopping point. The master of this philosophy further ensures his successful attainment of the object of his definite major purpose by taking the fifth step in the development of the habit of controlled attention. 5. Organized individual endeavor. Through the application of this principle one organizes his plans, then, with the aid of his mastermind allies he analyzes his plans, tests them, and makes sure that they are sound. By this time he has established a sound reason for his faith, therefore he moves with self-assurance that practically defies opposition. He is no longer held back by indecision and doubt. He knows precisely what he wants, he has definite plans for acquiring what he wants, and he is actively engaged in carrying out his plans, flanked and aided by mastermind allies in whom he has confidence, and who, in turn, inspire him with greater confidence in himself and his plans. But, he does not stop here. He takes the sixth step in consolidating his gains, by applying another important principle of this philosophy, viz. 6. Self-discipline. Through the aid of this principle the emotions are harnessed and brought under control. He no longer dissipates his energies, either by the overindulgence of his positive emotions or by giving expression to his negative emotions. His mind begins to function like a perfectly constructed piece of machinery, with no lost motion, no dissipation of energy. He has acquired the art of transmutation of his emotions, therefore his negative emotions, if and when they present themselves to his mind, are converted into positive action. He has begun to acquire complete control over his faculty of will, with the aid of which all the other departments of the mind are brought under his control and made to do constructive duty. He is approaching the apex of efficiency in the art of controlled attention. From here on he has everything under control, but there are still other steps to be taken which put the finishing touches on the consolidation of his gains over himself and the circumstances of his life which affect his attainment of his definite major purpose. Moving more swiftly now, because of the gains he has made through the 6 steps he has taken, he takes the 7th step, viz. 7. Creative vision. By the time the previous 6 steps have been taken the faculty of the imagination will have become so keen and alert that it begins to function automatically, thus further consolidating one's efforts to develop the habit of controlled attention. By this time the subconscious mind will have swung into action on its own account, and it will have begun to express itself through plans and ideas that will appear in the form of hunches. New opportunities will begin mysteriously to appear, and new and unexpected forms of cooperation from others will begin to present themselves. Everything he touches will appear to become a tool placed in his hands with which he may promote the object of his definite major purpose. Even the law of chance will appear to be operating in his favor. His friends will begin to speak of him as one who is blessed by luck. But, let no one be deceived on this point. Back of these favorable circumstances what will appear from all directions is a definite cause, and the master of this philosophy will understand that this cause may be explained by the application of the 7 principles here mentioned. But, the person who has mastered this entire philosophy will not be content to rest on his oars at this point. He will proceed to further consolidate his gains in the development of controlled attention by taking the 8th step. 8. Organized thought. Long before this point will have been reached the master of this philosophy will have stopped guessing, and he will have formed the habit of building plans based on known facts, or reasonable hypotheses of facts. As a matter of fact he will have begun, simultaneously with the adoption of a definite major purpose, to organize his thinking. By no means should it be assumed that he will wait until he has taken the 8th step in the development of controlled attention to apply the principle of organized thought. At this point, however, this principle will have become obviously a necessity in the development of the habit of controlled attention. Remember, we are now talking about the habit of controlled attention, the foundation for which must be laid by the application of organized thought beginning with the adoption of a definite major purpose. 9. Learning from defeat. By this time the student of this philosophy will have acquired the habit of converting every experience of his life into some definite benefit. Defeat will have become nothing but a signal for greater and more determined effort. He will have acquired the habit of searching for the seed of an equivalent benefit that is to be found in all forms of defeat. Defeat, therefore, will become a form of useful fuel with which he feeds the fire of his own willpower. He will not only convert current defeats into an urge to greater endeavor, but he will have acquired the habit of going back into his memory and profiting by all his previous defeats. This he will accomplish by taking retrospective inventory of himself every few months, thus enabling himself to analyze defeat from its results, through the lapse of time sufficient to remove the sting of the experience. By this time the master of this philosophy will have become literally a giant of power, compared with his former self, and there will be no space left in his brain for the housing of fear, discouragement, worry, or self-limitations of any other nature. He will know what he wants and where he is going in life, and he will recognize that he is well on his way toward his destination. The road ahead of him will be clear, and although it may have many curves beyond which he cannot see, he will know that when he reaches these the road will continue onward toward his destination. This is a glorious feeling, as every person who has experienced noteworthy achievement can testify. Having learned the art of converting defeat into a stimulus for greater effort, the student of this philosophy goes the 10th step in the development of controlled attention. 10. Inspiration. The gains attained through the application of the 9 principles here described lead to the development of the habit of enthusiasm, the action-producing quality that inspires one to take the initiative instead of being told what to do. The inspired feeling of enthusiasm takes the drudgery out of work and converts one's physical action into a pleasant experience, thus simplifying the development of controlled attention. Enthusiasm in connection with any plan, purpose, or motive automatically leads to the concentration of attention upon that subject. Through the principle of inspiration, the dominating thoughts of one's mind are quickly impressed upon the subconscious mind, where they are acted upon. Thus the person whose mind is dominated by enthusiasm has the direct support of what is assumed to be the connecting link between the conscious mind and infinite intelligence. At this point he has attained a high degree of efficiency in the application of controlled attention. Meanwhile, the master of this philosophy will have added momentum to his efforts, in support of the 10 principles here described, by the application of the 11th principle, through which he will have taken the next step in developing the habit of controlled attention, viz. 11. Attractive personality. While this is mentioned as the 11th step in the development of the habit of controlled attention, the student will have begun applying this principle immediately following his adoption of a definite major purpose. By application of the qualities of an attractive personality he will have removed much of the opposition of other people, and he will have attracted the friendly cooperation of many allies other than those allied with him in his mastermind group. He will have, also, improved his own mental attitude, thus preparing the way for the development of any desired habit, including the habit of controlled attention. It is obvious, therefore, that controlled attention is the result of the application of all the principles here mentioned, and not a matter of chance. It is obvious, also, that the method by which the habit of controlled attention is developed involves no effort beyond the ability of the average person, it calls for no special training or education other than that here mentioned, it is a success quality well within the reach of the person of average ability, its development calls for no unreasonable amount of sacrifice or labor, the major requirements being the will to win and a willingness to pay the price of achievement in terms of honest application. Having mastered these 11 principles, through systematic application and use, the student of this philosophy finds himself pushed forward into the 12th and last step in the development of the habit of controlled attention. In mastering the 11 principles he has automatically developed the 12th, and lo! He finds himself the master of himself, the master of his fate, the captain of his soul. Although only 12 of the principles of this philosophy have been considered, the person who has mastered these is now in possession of his own mind. He knows what he wants. He has a plan for acquiring it. He has surrounded himself with trustworthy aids in acquiring the object of his definite major purpose. He feels the thrill of personal power. He has the necessary self-discipline to enable him to use this power wisely, nay, he has no desire to use it in any other than a constructive manner that benefits all whom it influences. He has become a constructive unit of the great American way of life, and as such he has given himself immunity against the subtle forces seeking to destroy the American form of self-determination and personal freedom. He has learned how to acquire his needs without damaging others. He no longer desires something for nothing, for he has learned a better way of acquiring his needs. He has found peace and harmony within his own mind. He has learned to accept the circumstances of life as he finds them and to make the most of them. He has acquired the art of peaceful and harmonious negotiation with others through which he relates himself to other people in a manner that works for the good of all. Let us now give attention to another feature of controlled attention, which suggests the way to personal power, through a combination of principles. As I have stated, there is a chemistry of the brain through which the mind power of individuals is modified by the influence of one mind on another. This fact is obvious, even to the layman who has given no particular study to the subject of mental phenomena or personalities. We have seen, also, that in the field of organic chemistry certain harmless elements may be so combined as to create a deadly poison. From these observations we may safely assume that everything, from the individual atom of matter to a human being, is modified or changed in some form by the presence of other things. Knowing these facts to be such, we shall have no difficulty in assuming that the presence, in the mind, of a combination of thoughts may convert them into a power that cannot be identified with any individual thought, and one that may be greater than all of them combined. For example, we know from observation and experience that the following principles, when assembled in the mind through a combination of thoughts, may produce mind power bordering upon the miraculous. 1. Definiteness of purpose. 2. Self-discipline, through control of the emotions. 3. Controlled attention. 4. Autosuggestion, applied to the object of one's purpose. 5. The power of will, actively engaged. Here is a combination of principles capable of producing sufficient power for the solution of almost any problem by which one is confronted. The power comes from the combination, not from any single principle. Let us see how the principles are applied to produce power. Let us say that a man is faced by one of the commonest of all problems, the need of a certain amount of money for some specific purpose, within a specified time. There are two major ways of dealing with the problem. First, by worrying about it but doing nothing to raise the money. This is the usual way of handling such problems. Second, by combining the 5 principles here mentioned and going after the money in earnest. The amount of money required is known and one has made up his mind to get it. That is definiteness of purpose. The mind is put to work, through the faculty of the imagination, acquiring the money, to the exclusion of all other problems. That is controlled attention. The mind is cleared of all fear and doubt that the money cannot be procured. That is self-discipline. The control of the emotion of fear thus prepares the mind for the exercise of faith. The mind is put to work, through the faculty of the imagination, on creating something of an equivalent value that is to be given in return for the money, or for its temporary use, and it is kept at work until it singles out one specific idea. That is autosuggestion. The mind is given repeated suggestions that the amount of money desired will be procured, no matter what the cost may be or what conditions have to be complied with, and there it remains, set, determined, persistent. That is willpower, in action, when these 5 principles are combined, and applied in the manner described with variations to suit each different circumstance, the subconscious mind goes to work and creates a plan, sometimes a variety of plans, by which the money may be procured. If one experiences failure, it is because there has been a slackening of effort in connection with one or more of these principles. I have seen this combination of principles produce results that were almost unbelievable. I have heard highly successful men endorse this combination of principles as having superpower which they made no effort to explain because it seems inexplicable. The combination of the 5 principles I have just mentioned provides one with power that is not attributable to any one of these principles alone. The experiences of men of great achievement bear this out. First we shall hear from Thomas A. Edison, whose statement on the subject is quoted as nearly verbatim as memory will permit. "You ask me," said Mr. Edison, "to name the most important essential in the field of invention. Well, I can describe it very briefly. It consists, first, of definite knowledge as to what one wants to achieve, definiteness of purpose. One must fix his mind on that purpose with that sort of persistence which knows no such word as impossible, and begins searching for that which he seeks, making use of all the accumulated knowledge on the subject he can find, drawing upon his own experience, and making use of the experience of other people, the master mind, controlled attention, autosuggestion. He must keep on searching, no matter how many times his search leads to a dead-end street, power of will. He must refuse to be influenced by the fact that someone else may have tried the same idea without success, self-discipline, mastery of fear and doubt. He must keep himself sold on the idea that the solution of his problem exists somewhere, and that he will find it, autosuggestion. Then Mr. Edison went on to say, when a man makes up his mind to solve a problem he may, at first, meet with dogged opposition, but if he holds on and keeps searching he will be sure to find some sort of a solution. I never knew the plan to fail. A combination of all 5 of the principles is involved here. The trouble with most people, he continued, is that they quit before they start. By this he meant, of course, that self-imposed limitations prohibit most people from beginning tasks which they might easily complete if they made a start and kept on going, in the right sort of mental attitude. In all my experience, Mr. Edison said, I do not recall ever having found the solution to any problem connected with invention through my first effort, with the exception of the talking machine. And one of the most surprising of all things is the fact that when I have discovered that for which I am searching, I generally find that the answer was within my reach all the time, but nothing but persistence and a will to win would have uncovered it. Now let us hear from Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the modern telephone. I discovered the principle of the long-distance telephone while searching for the means of producing a mechanical hearing aid, for the benefit of my wife whose hearing was impaired. I made up my mind to find that for which I was searching if it required the remainder of my life. After innumerable failures I finally uncovered the principle for which I was searching, and was astounded at its simplicity. I was still more astounded to discover that the principle I revealed was not only beneficial in the construction of a mechanical hearing aid, but it served also as a means of sending the sound of the voice over a wire. Dr. Bell made use of all 5 of the principles here described, although he may have done so unconsciously. Another discovery that grew out of my investigations, said Dr. Bell, was the fact that when a man gives his brain an order to produce a definite result and stands by that order, it seems to have the effect of giving him a second sight that enables him to see right through ordinary problems. What this power is I cannot say, all I know is that it exists, and it becomes available only when a man is in that state of mind in which he knows exactly what he wants and is determined to get just that. I shall now introduce John Wanamaker, the late merchant king of Philadelphia. On numerous occasions during the early part of my business career, said Mr. Wanamaker, I found myself in need of funds for the operation of my business which I could not procure through any of the usual commercial or banking channels. On every such occasion I made it my business to go out to the park and begin walking, thinking as I walked of new sources of approach to the solution of my problem. On one such occasion I needed a very large sum, due to the fact that we had had an off-season and found our shelves stocked with merchandise we could not convert into ready cash. I made up my mind not to go back to the store until I had solved my problem. I kept my mind on it every second. At the end of about the second hour an idea burst into my mind that enabled me to walk right back to the store and raise the necessary amount of money within 15 minutes. The strangest part of the experience was the fact I did not think of that idea at the start. Controlled attention, plus definiteness of purpose, formed the combination that served Mr. Wanamaker in this instance. Perhaps applied faith was a part of the combination of principles he used, but of that he made no mention. He did say, however, that, I doubt that there is any such reality as an unsolvable problem for the man who has learned how to hold his mind on his problem with a firm determination to find its solution. That was the equivalent to saying that there is no such thing as an unsolvable problem for the man who knows how to use faith. Now let us hear from Dr. Elmer R. Gates, one of the distinguished scientists and inventors of 3 decades ago who collaborated in the organization of this philosophy. There is some hidden source of power, said Dr. Gates, which comes to a man's aid when he sets his mind on a definite goal and becomes determined to attain it. With the aid of this power I have uncovered the secrets of more than 200 inventions, not one of which existed in my accumulated knowledge at the beginning of my search. It is possible to fix the attention on a given problem and to keep it there until the solution of the problem seems to float into the mind from the air. The greatest of all problems is that of maintaining sufficient will power to keep one's mind concentrated upon a single purpose long enough to enable one to tap this mysterious source of inward sight. When asked to explain what he meant by the term inward sight, Dr. Gates replied, I have reference to the sixth sense through which the subconscious mind seems to yield the answer to problems submitted to it in the mental attitude I have described. Remember, these men were among the most distinguished men of achievement known to the people of America during their lifetime. Each was a recognized success in his own field. Let us have a word now from the late President Woodrow Wilson. When the request came from the German military authorities for an armistice, in 1918, said Mr. Wilson, it presented one of the greatest and most profound problems of my 2 terms in the White House. I knew a decision had to be made. I knew that the lives of thousands of people depended upon that decision. And I knew that I had to make the decision. I laid the request aside for a few minutes, closed my eyes, and became determined to seek guidance from a source greater than my own faculty of reason. In a little while I picked up the paper and walked out onto the rear porch of the White House, stood there with my eyes closed, the paper clenched in my hand, and asked for divine guidance. I was resolved not to rely upon my own judgment alone. In a little while, it was not more than 5 minutes, the answer came. It was so definite, so obviously sound, that I went right back to my study and wrote the reply in shorthand. Subsequent events proved that I made the right answer, for it was but a little while after I sent it that the German Kaiser had been dethroned by his own people and was on his way into exile. What was this strange power on which the war president relied for his answer? He made no attempt to explain it. One can only surmise as to what he believed it to be, but there is one fact of which there is no doubt: the president forced his mind to seek the solution of a grave problem and it produced the desired results. His experience was controlled attention of the most profound nature. It appears that controlled attention is more effective during an emergency, when one is forced to concentrate his thoughts upon some definite problem. And let it not be forgotten that controlled attention has a great deal of power when it is motivated by fear, but the power seems to be limited to the medium of physical expression of power. When frightened, a man may develop great physical strength, because he concentrates all of his efforts in some particular direction, but this sort of power is small indeed, in comparison with the spiritual power that becomes available through the emotion of faith. Controlled attention, inspired by faith, is a far different power from that which is created through fear. If Woodrow Wilson had concentrated his mind upon his answer to the German government's request for an armistice in a spirit of fear, I doubt that he would have received the sort of guidance that he did, which enabled him to send an answer that put an end to the former Kaiser of Germany. Dr. Bell discovered the principle which made the telephone possible as the result of an emergency, occasioned by his wife's deafness. Of course, the significance of the emergency is this: it causes one to control his attention in a more highly concentrated form than he would under ordinary circumstances. It appears that these unexplained results, sometimes called miracles, experienced by people who rely upon their own minds, generally occur under the stress of some emergency when by the very nature of the circumstance, they are forced to intensify the concentration of their thoughts upon a definite subject. Two factors are always present under such circumstances. First, the emergency steps up the vibration of thought to a highly intense state of emotional feeling. Second, that emotion is concentrated upon one definite major purpose. The purpose of controlled attention, as far as this philosophy is concerned, is that of enabling one to bring together all the departments of the mind and harness their combined power for use in connection with a given purpose. That is what controlled attention amounts to. It stimulates coordinated action by the faculty of the will, the faculty of the emotions, the faculty of reason, the conscience, the memory, the faculty of the imagination, the sixth sense, the subconscious section of the mind, and it seems a reasonable hypothesis to assume that the combined forces of these departments of the mind make direct contact with infinite intelligence, under any circumstance which brings all of them into action simultaneously. This hypothesis seems all the more logical because it has the endorsement, in about the same terms in which we have described it, of the late Thomas A. Edison, Dr. Elmer R. Gates, Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, President Woodrow Wilson, Andrew Carnegie, and many others equally capable of reaching a logical conclusion on so profound a subject. The facts upon which this hypothesis is based, with one exception, are known to be accurate. It is known that the combined power of the 8 factors of the mind, when they are coordinated and expressed in action, through controlled attention, enables one to perform deeds which border on the miraculous. The source of power that makes this possible has not been isolated definitely, but the results are so astounding that they could not be attributed to any power short of infinite intelligence. The burden of this lesson, however, is not to define the source of the power, but to describe workable methods by which it may be drawn upon and used in connection with the daily problems of men. In the performance of this responsibility I do not have to rely upon hypotheses, for I have carefully tested and accurately proved formulas on which to depend, formulas which I know to be sound and practical because they have been used successfully by men of outstanding achievements in every walk of life. More than 500 men of this caliber, who collaborated through a long period of years in the organization of this philosophy, were specifically questioned on this matter of controlled attention, and here is a brief transcript of what some of them said. Asa Candler, founder of the Coca-Cola business. My opinion of the value of concentrated effort can best be stated by mention of the fact that we spend a huge fortune annually for the sole purpose of concentrating the attention of the public on the name Coca-Cola. It may interest you to know that this name is worth many millions of dollars, but it would soon become worthless if we neglected to keep the public's attention concentrated on it. Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company. My whole life work speaks for itself as to my opinion of the value of concentrated action. Our fortune, our skilled talent, and all our other assets are combined for the sole purpose of giving the public the greatest possible amount of transportation service for the least possible cost. The success of our business has depended, very largely, upon our never having deviated from this policy. William Wrigley, Jr., the Chewing Gum King. What I think about concentrated effort can best be described by examining the 5-cent package of chewing gum, to the manufacture and distribution of which I have devoted all my time. Temptations to divert my attention and some of my money into other channels have been many and varied, but I stuck to my original definite major purpose because I recognized, early in life, that no man can succeed if he splits his energies and diverts his attention in many different directions. Incidentally, Mr. Wrigley was the first student of my philosophy of American achievement, after it had been organized and tested. Andrew Carnegie, the man who inspired the organization of the philosophy, and directed the earlier stages of its organization, had a favorite slogan which he expressed on every appropriate occasion. It was this: "Place all your eggs in one basket, then watch the basket closely to see that no one kicks it over." By that he meant, of course, to concentrate all of one's attention upon a single definite major purpose. He did precisely that, in the development of the great steel industry he founded, and in the accumulation of his huge fortune. King Gillette, producer of the first practical safety razor. By concentrating all my attention and my fortune upon the production of a safety razor, I have not only fulfilled a mission in life that has given me great satisfaction and a stable fortune, but I have rendered a priceless service to millions of men who use my product. I have stuck to this one definite major purpose because I realize that an average lifetime is not long enough to permit one to attain more than one major goal. Edwin C. Barnes, national distributor of the Eddy phone and the only business partner that Thomas A. Edison had. I have confined my efforts entirely to the sale and distribution of Eddy phones, Edison dictating machines, because I learned from Mr. Edison, quite early in life, the benefits of concentrated effort. One of the first of Mr. Edison's traits of character which I observed was his habit of controlling his attention upon one thing at a time. While it is true that he created many different inventions, it must be remembered that he concentrated all of his attention in the field of invention, and always fixed his attention on one invention at a time. To this one habit more than any other, perhaps, does he owe his astounding success as an inventor. John Wanamaker, the Merchant King of Philadelphia. Controlled attention, behind a single purpose, is the secret of all human achievement. The man who acquires this art and applies it skillfully thereby connects himself with a source of power that is not available to him through any other method. What this power is, how it can best be tapped and used, are questions beyond my sphere of activity, but I do know that it exists, for I have used it as the basis of all my business experience. And I can tell you this about it: it becomes, under certain circumstances, an irresistible power sufficient for the solution of all human problems. James J. Hill, founder of the Great Northern Railway System. The man who spreads his energies over many different enterprises resembles the man who shuts his eyes when he aims at an object and fires a gun. He may spread his shot in many different directions without hitting the target. Controlled attention has been my greatest asset. I have used it during most of the adult period of my life, and particularly in building and operating the Great Northern Railway. John D. Rockefeller, Sr., founder of the Standard Oil Company. From the very first day that I took my first job, as a bookkeeper, until this very moment, I have followed the plan of centering my attention upon one thing at a time. Controlled attention places a man in contact with a source of power that gives him what amounts to a sort of super wisdom in the management of his affairs. I have invested large sums of money in many different businesses and industries, but I earned this money in the business on which I have concentrated most of my thought, the oil business. No part of my attention has been given to any of the industries in which I have made investments, except my own. Wilbur Wright, co-inventor of the Wright airplane. My brother Orville and I always followed the habit of concentrating our attention upon one major purpose, and that was the perfecting of a heavier-than-air flying machine. If we had split our attention, I doubt that we would ever have built a machine that could have flown successfully. Frank W. Woolworth, founder of the Woolworth 5 and 10 cent stores, from the day that I originated the modern 5 and 10 cent store plan, I have devoted all my attention to my definite major purpose, the operation of our stores. Controlled attention played a much more important part in the success of our business than any other factor. Imitators soon entered the field with plans similar to ours, and some of them did quite well, but we remained steadfast in carrying out our original plan. Perhaps this is why we have been known as the leaders in this field for so many years. Arthur W. Nash, founder of the Nash made-to-order clothing business, our real success began when we discovered that a business thrives best when everyone connected with it concentrates his mind upon the success of the business. Before we made this discovery, we were working at cross purposes. By combining definiteness of purpose, the golden rule applied, and controlled attention, we converted a business that was insolvent into a business that now pays adequate dividends to every person who works in it. The combination of these three principles gave us access to a source of power we had not been using before. George Pullman, inventor of the modern Pullman sleeping car. The change in my economic affairs came when I discovered that a man can do but one thing at a time, if he does it well. My entire time has been concentrated upon the refinement of the Pullman car. This has been responsible, more than anything else, for the success we have enjoyed. Julius Rosenwald, former owner of Sears, Roebuck and Company, controlled attention, in combination with definiteness of purpose, the golden rule applied, and creative vision, have made our company the acknowledged leader in the mail-order merchandising field. Of these latter three principles I would emphasize the first, because without it the other two would lose much of their economic significance. Milo C. Jones, the Wisconsin farmer who made a fortune after being stricken by double paralysis. After I lost the use of my body, I concentrated all the powers of my mind on a single idea, the making of little pig sausage, and I was amazed to learn that I could accomplish by controlled attention alone much more than I had previously been able to accomplish with the full use of my body. With the aid of the mastermind principle, I could use the physical capacities of other members of my family, in the management of the business, but the planning that was necessary took place through the concentration of my own mind on that single purpose. Walter C. Chrysler, the founder of the Chrysler Motor Company. I agree with Andrew Carnegie that it is a sound policy for one to place all his eggs in one basket and then watch the basket. The better portion of my life has been devoted to the manufacture and sale of fine motor cars. I have concentrated all my energies on this one definite major purpose. It is surprising what a man can accomplish when he gains the necessary self-discipline to enable him to control his attention by holding it on one thing at a time. Whatever success I have attained has been largely the result of definiteness of purpose, the mastermind principle, creative vision, organized individual endeavor, self-discipline, and controlled attention, with strong emphasis on the latter. Many readers will remember that tragic year 1933, when Franklin D. Roosevelt became the president for his first term. The business depression had spread fear in the minds of the people, and the whole economic structure was in a state of wild chaos, with banks failing and businesses suspending and men being thrown out of jobs by the tens of thousands. Scare headlines about the business depression filled the newspapers, and everyone was talking, thinking, and acting in terms of fear and doubt. Being an experienced student of psychology, the president went to work to stop the stampede of fear. His first move was designed to make use of the principle of controlled attention, not on the part of a few, but on the part of all the people of the United States. Let us analyze his action, for here we find many of the principles of this philosophy in operation in a practical way, in one of the greatest emergencies this country has ever known. The president's first move was to call the leaders of both houses of Congress to the White House for a conference at which he sold them the idea of forgetting party affiliations and concentrating all their efforts on the one task of re-establishing confidence in the minds of the American people. Then he called in the representatives of the newspapers and engaged them in a similar commitment. The church leaders were asked to engage in the same undertaking, regardless of their denomination, and they complied willingly. The radio announcers were enlisted in the same cause and they went to work in earnest, selling Americanism to the people of America. The president himself inaugurated his famous Fireside Talks program and spoke directly to the American people. In these and other similar endeavors too numerous to mention, the people of America were brought together, in one masterstroke, utilizing application of the principle of controlled attention, for the sole purpose of restoring confidence in the American way of life, in the American institutions, and, above all, in the American people themselves. The results were like magic. Almost overnight the scare headlines about business depression were dropped and their places were filled with headlines about business recovery. Every adult remembers this circumstance, but one of the great tragedies of it lies in the fact that so few people caught the full significance of the power that brought this rapid change about, the power of controlled attention focused upon a definite major purpose. An emergency was at hand. In fact, it was a national emergency such as the people had never seen before. Spurred on by the seriousness of this emergency, the people dropped their personal prejudices of race, creed, and political leanings, and concentrated their minds upon the one task of restoring confidence, with the result that the whole economic picture began to swing back from failure to success. Here is an impressive example of what happens when people blend their minds and place their combined mind power back of a definite major purpose, in a spirit of controlled attention. The principle works as well for individuals as it worked for the nation as a whole. There is sufficient power available through any normal brain, if it is organized and directed to a definite end through controlled attention, to bring the solution of the individual's major problems of life, not to mention the solution of the minor problems, most of which would not exist if one followed the habit of controlled attention in dealing with these problems. Successful businessmen, and others who have given thought to the subject, have long known that the best way to deal with unpleasant problems is to tackle the hardest of them first, and to do it without fear or procrastination, by centering the attention upon it and keeping it there until a solution has been found. It is surprising to learn how quickly the most embarrassing problems will melt away into nothing when one concentrates his attention upon them with a determined will to liquidate them. But this is not the way the average person handles such problems. Most people handle unpleasant problems about the same way that the lazy housekeeper keeps house, by sweeping the dirt under the carpet. Little problems grow into big ones when left to run their course, without attention. As one noted psychologist explained the power of controlled attention, it burns a hole straight through the heart of the knottiest of problems if one places back of it a determined will. And he might well have added that controlled attention not only burns a hole through the heart of a problem, but it keeps on until it liquidates what is left around the hole. The late Cyrus H. K. Curtis, the former owner of the Saturday Evening Post, had this to say about the principle of controlled attention. When I first purchased the Saturday Evening Post, it consisted mainly of its name and some debts. My definite major purpose was to make the Post the greatest magazine property in the United States. Back of this aim I concentrated all my attention, all my money and all my influence with my friends, with a faith in the future of the magazine which had no limitations. Because of lack of operating capital, the first years of the Post were fraught with difficulties sufficient to have discouraged anyone with less faith than I had. There were times when I owed more money than I could have raised if I had sold everything I possessed, including the Post, and sometimes my creditors were not generous. My closest friends begged me to give up the Post and devote my efforts to something requiring less work and less operating capital, but I had committed myself to do a job and I was determined to do it, no matter how long it required, or what effort had to be put into it. I went through many years of this sort of experience, some of them pushing me so far into the red that it looked as if I might never get out. That is, it looked that way to everyone except myself. All through those years of hardship I kept my mind concentrated on the job ahead of me, and not on the pleadings of my friends who wished me to give it up and quit. I have always felt a contempt for a quitter, and especially the quitter who gives up before he has made an earnest effort to win. Now the big fight is over, and I have won. I have made the post exactly what I started out to make it, a fact to which even my competitors will testify. Would I go through the same fight again, if I had it to do over again? Why, yes, of course I would. There is a sort of compensation that is experienced by the man who has had a stiff fight but has won the battle, a form of compensation which, I fear, others never know. Whenever you see a copy of the Saturday Evening Post, just say to yourself, here is physical evidence that controlled attention, backed by definiteness of purpose, cannot be defeated. That is about the way the story goes with all men who have attained noteworthy success. All of them go through their testing time, as Andrew Carnegie expressed it, that shows what sort of metal they are made of. I have never heard of any person achieving great success without having gone through difficulties, and unpleasant experiences, and the one quality which best stands out during these periods of testing time is controlled attention. The Saturday Evening Post is now one of the great magazines of the country. It is the envy of the magazine publishers' field, but we wonder if the millions of people who read it each week ever take the time to study its early history, or know that it is the product of one man's mind, a man who had vision, and imagination, and enthusiasm, and personal initiative, and the fortitude to carry on when the going was hard. I wonder, too, how many people recognize that the greatness of the Saturday Evening Post, as compared with many other magazines that have come and gone since its birth, is measured in almost exact proportion to the difficulties through which Cyrus H. K. Curtis nursed it during its early history. I have singled out the Saturday Evening Post because almost everyone is acquainted with it. The same illustration might well be applied to almost any other great industry, for always there is some one person, or a small group of persons, who concentrate their minds upon a definite purpose and carry a business through its testing time, before success arrives. Perhaps there is no greater example in all history of the power of concentrated effort than that which is associated with the history of our own country. The American way of life, as we know it today, was born of struggle and hardship and personal sacrifice that has rarely, if ever, been experienced by those of us who enjoy the privileges of this country. It would pay every reader to spend a few evenings reading of the early history of the United States, especially that portion of it which began with the Declaration of Independence, when 56 brave men signed their names to the most important compact designed to bring freedom to a people that the world has ever known. Today, the people of the United States, as well as the people of most of the other countries of the world, are faced by a world emergency which threatens the destruction of the great American way of life, with all of its blessings and rights of personal liberty and its abundance of opportunities. As I take inventory of what is happening in this country to destroy the unity of the people, I am puzzled to know why the people do not profit by the experience of those brave men who gave the country its solidity and its security when the country was young and weak. I want, too, to know why the people have so soon forgotten the methods by which the President of the United States stopped the stampede of fear in 1933, and re-established temporary confidence, through the principle of controlled attention, backed by a definite purpose. If these principles were sound in the past, they must be equally as sound today. If unity of the people were helpful a little over 165 years ago, when the nation was being wrested from tyranny, such solidarity should be equally helpful today, in our present crisis. And we might well add that if this principle were helpful to the nation as a whole, it may be equally helpful to any small group who set out to accomplish a desirable end, under the mastermind principle. Wherever people coordinate their efforts in a spirit of harmony for the attainment of a definite purpose, and begin to work for its attainment, they find themselves aided by a mysterious power which gives momentum to their efforts. If they happen to be martyrs who have been brought together through persecution, the power available to them is, for some strange reason, apparently increased. About 100 years ago a man by the name of Joseph Smith founded a religion known as Mormonism. A religious war sprang up in the community where Smith and his followers lived, which resulted in the murder of him and his brother Hiram, while they were confined in a jail in Illinois. The leadership of the group was taken over by Brigham Young, who moved a majority of them into the then wilderness of Utah, 2,000 miles from the more populous section of the United States. They carried with them barely enough food and seed for planting and utensils for household and farming purposes to keep them from starving to death. After cutting their way through 2,000 miles of wilderness, fighting Indians and battling against the elements, they finally arrived at what is now Salt Lake City, Utah, and settled. They planted what seed they carried with them, but it had no sooner sprouted above the ground than it was set upon by grasshoppers and almost devoured. To add to their miseries, the United States government sent soldiers to Utah, ostensibly to put down polygamy. They went at the job so crudely that they antagonized the entire Mormon population, but the Mormons held out and the little colony survived. The stories told by the Mormons, of their sacrifices, were almost unbelievable, but they have been substantiated in all of the essential details. The years went by and the Mormons grew and prospered, making their living entirely from the soil. It is generally conceded that no group of people, throughout the pioneering days of this country, from the early Pilgrim settlers on down to the present, were harassed and persecuted as severely as were the Mormons. Today, a little less than 100 years after the Mormons settled in Utah, we find them a peaceful and prosperous people, still making their living, for the most part, from the soil of the earth. During the Depression, while millions of people were on government relief throughout the nation, the Mormons were the first to announce that thereafter no Mormon would ask for charity. They had found a way to become self-sustaining and determining. Now, we are not interested in the Mormon religion as such, nor are we interested in the Mormon people except to call attention to what happens when a group of people is driven to martyrdom, as the Mormons were. Here we have a convincing example of the soundness of Andrew Carnegie's motto that adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent benefit. The Mormons met with adversity on a scale almost beyond human endurance. As to the merits or demerits of their cause, or their religion, or their former domestic relationships, we are in no way interested, but we are keenly interested in learning the secret by which a group of people may so combine their fortunes and their efforts that each individual may get the necessities of life without asking for public charity. Study the Mormons carefully and you will find that the secret of their self-determination, if there is anything about it that can be called secret, dates back to the spirit of perseverance which they developed while fighting for their lives. They were driven to pool their scant economic resources and their spiritual resources for their defense against a society that was trying to exterminate them. In forming that pool they discovered something which should be of keen interest to the rest of us. They discovered that there is power in unity of purpose and coordination of physical effort. They not only discovered the mastermind principle, but they used it to save themselves from total annihilation and used it to save themselves from the humility of accepting public charity, in an era when millions of other people who were never persecuted were seeking subsidy through government relief. The Mormons not only understand the principle of controlled attention, but that principle has been used by them so successfully that they have wrested victory from defeat, in a world that was bent upon destroying them. Their application of this principle was, at first, a matter of necessity. They were forced to concentrate their attention upon a definite major purpose or be annihilated. Later, perhaps, they began making use of the principle out of preference, because they had learned of its stupendous power while fighting for existence. Before leaving the subject of the Mormons, I wish to make one other observation concerning them. Today they have missionaries in practically every part of the United States, and in most of the countries of the world. Having made a place for themselves under the most severe conditions, they are now being recognized throughout the world, as favorably as they were once persecuted. There is no spirit of revenge among the Mormon people today. If they ever felt revengeful for the persecution they were forced to undergo, it has now been subdued. They hold no grudges against anyone on any score. Perhaps that may be one reason why they are being accepted so freely throughout the world. Their mental attitude is positive and constructive. They are loyal American citizens, conforming in every way to the best and most approved habits of the American way of life. In all this country no finer example of the soundness of Emerson's essay on compensation can be found than that of the Mormons. That which was taken from them by the generation of 100 years ago is now being freely and willingly repaid to them by this generation. Here is food for thought of the highest order. Let us recognize truth wherever we find it. Moreover, let us appropriate truth and make use of it, no matter from what source it may come. If the Mormons have a better way of relating themselves to one another than have the rest of us, let us discover their way and make use of it. Let us be fair, to ourselves at least, and analyze the Mormon way of life, not by their habits of 100 years ago, but their habits of today. The whole world is in a state of maladjustment. Human relationships have been disturbed in this and all other countries, to a point of danger which threatens civilization. It behooves us, therefore, to observe the methods of any individual or group of individuals who have found a way to relate themselves to life harmoniously. When we find even one person who has discovered how to live harmoniously with the rest of the world, let us inquire into his philosophy, for despite the fact we may come into his presence to scoff, we may find it advantageous to remain and pray. Controlled attention makes this sort of analysis possible. It enables one to pierce the outer covering of things and people as they appear to be, and to learn what exists under the covering. The world needs this sort of analysis right now. Most of us are too much inclined to view the outward appearances and the material aspects of things and people, overlooking the reality that lies underneath. And this tragic habit has brought the whole world to the very brink of spiritual bankruptcy. This philosophy was intended, originally, as a philosophy of individual achievement, designed mainly to enable people to procure the material needs of life without violating the rights of others. Mr. Carnegie had this in mind when he inspired the research which resulted in the philosophy. But the changed conditions of the world, since Mr. Carnegie's time, have led me to look at an entirely new world, a world of spiritual wealth, a world in which the finer arts of human relationship have been revealed, and it is the greater spirit of understanding that I wish the reader of this chapter to acquire. I have endeavored to show that there is a difference between controlled attention and ordinary concentration of efforts. Let us make sure that we understand the nature and extent of this difference. The word control is the key to the explanation of the difference. Controlled attention means the act of coordinating all the faculties of the mind and directing their combined power to a given end. Such is an act which requires self-discipline of the highest order. It also requires the development of controlled habits. As a matter of fact, one cannot control attention without the supporting influence of well-developed habits of thought. Now let us consider some of the circumstances under which controlled attention is applied, viz. 1. Prayer. When one prays, if he understands the true meaning of prayer, and prays in a state of mind that has been cleared of all fear and doubt, he does so by setting aside his own faculty of reason, his faculty of will, and all other faculties of the mind except the faculty of the emotions. With the mind under control he concentrates all his positive emotions, especially the emotion of faith, on the object of his prayer, having such a deep faith in its attainment that he can see himself already in possession of it. Under this sort of controlled attention one makes direct connection with infinite intelligence. If the prayer is answered favorably, the answer comes in the form of an inspired idea, plan, or method by which one may, through his own efforts, acquire that for which he prays. The words used in prayer are immaterial. The state of mind in which the prayer is offered is the thing that counts. The factor of faith must be present. The slightest shade of fear or doubt or indecision in connection with one's right to get that for which he prays will bring negative results. The mind must be free from every other thought except that connected with the object of the prayer. The prayer must continue until it produces the desired results. Sometimes this happens within a matter of seconds, at other times the answer may be deferred for hours, days, months, or years, according to the nature of the prayer and what is necessary for its fulfillment. Prayer expressed in times of emergency, when the mind is dominated by fear, has seldom been known to produce the desired results, although the one who prays may be in great need of aid. Prayer based on a request for something which would call for the cessation of natural law, or the circumvention or violation of natural law, will bring negative results. Prayer asking for results that would damn others fails, also, and for the very understandable reason that the person who makes such a request has in his mind some form of revenge, greed, selfishness, or other negative emotion which renders the prayer ineffective. Successful prayer depends upon adequate preparation of the mind for the expression of prayer. That preparation is controlled attention based on faith. Prayer is power. Dr. Alexis Carrel, who devoted 33 years to biological research at the Rockefeller Institute, and is the author of Man, the Unknown, analyzed prayer as follows. Prayer is not only worship, it is also an invisible emanation of man's worshipping spirit, the most powerful form of energy that one can generate. The influence of prayer on the human mind and body is as demonstrable as that of secreting glands. Its results can be measured in terms of increased physical buoyancy, greater intellectual vigor, moral stamina, and a deeper understanding of the realities underlying human relationships. If you make a habit of sincere prayer, your life will be very noticeably and profoundly altered. Prayer stamps with its indelible mark our actions and demeanor. A tranquility of bearing, a facial and bodily repose, are observed in those whose inner lives are thus enriched. Within the depths of consciousness a flame kindles. And man sees himself. He discovers himself. He discovers his selfishness, his silly pride, his fears, his greed, his blunders. He develops a sense of moral obligation, intellectual humility. Thus begins a journey of the soul toward the realm of grace. Prayer is a force as real as terrestrial gravity. As a physician I have seen men, after all other therapy had failed, lifted out of disease and melancholy by the serene effort of prayer. It is the only power in the world that seems to overcome the so-called laws of nature. The occasions on which prayer has dramatically done this have been termed miracles. But a constant, quieter miracle takes place hourly in the hearts of men and women who have discovered that prayer supplies them with a steady flow of sustaining power in their daily lives. Too many people regard prayer as a formalized routine of words, a refuge for weaklings, or a childish petition for material things. We sadly undervalue prayer when we conceive it in these terms, just as we should underestimate rain by describing it as something that fills the birdbath in our garden. Properly understood, prayer is a mature activity indispensable to the fullest development of personality, the ultimate integration of man's highest faculties. Only in prayer do we achieve that complete and harmonious assembly of body, mind and spirit which gives the frail human reed its unshakable strength. The words, "Ask and it shall be given to you," have been verified by the experience of humanity. True, prayer may not restore the dead child to life or bring relief from physical pain. But prayer, like radium, is a source of luminous, self-generating energy. How does prayer fortify us with so much dynamic power? To answer this question, admittedly outside the jurisdiction of science, I must point out that all prayers have one thing in common. The triumphant hosannas of a great oratorio, or the humble supplication of an Iroquois hunter begging for luck in the chase, demonstrate the same truth, that human beings seek to augment their finite energy by addressing themselves to the infinite source of all energy. When we pray, we link ourselves with the inexhaustible motive power that spins the universe. We ask that a part of this power be apportioned to our needs. Even in asking, our human deficiencies are minimized and we arise strengthened and repaired. But we must never summon God merely for the gratification of our whims. We derive most power from prayer when we use it not as a petition, but as a supplication that we may become more like Him. Prayer should be regarded as practice of the presence of God. An old peasant was seated alone in the last pew of the village church. "What are you waiting for?" he was asked, and he answered, "I am looking at him and he is looking at me." Man prays not only that God should remember him, but also that he should remember God. How can prayer be defined? Prayer is the effort of man to reach God, to commune with an invisible being, creator of all things, supreme wisdom, truth, beauty, and strength, Father and Redeemer of each man. This goal of prayer always remains hidden to intelligence. For both language and thought fail when we attempt to describe God. We do know, however, that whenever we address God in fervent prayer we change both soul and body for the better. It could not happen that any man or woman could pray for a single moment without some good result. No man ever prayed, said Emerson, without learning something. One can pray everywhere. In the streets, the subway, the office, the shop, the school, as well as in the solitude of one's own room or among the crowd in a church. There is no prescribed posture, time or place. Think of God more often than you breathe, said Epictetus, the Stoic. In order really to mold personality, prayer must become a habit. It is meaningless to pray in the morning and to live like a barbarian the remainder of the day. True prayer is a way of life, the truest life is literally a way of prayer. The best prayers are like the improvisations of gifted lovers, always about the same thing yet never twice the same. We cannot all be as creative in prayer as Saint Teresa or Bernard of Clairvaux, both of whom poured their adoration into words of mystical beauty. Fortunately, we do not need their eloquence, our slightest impulse to prayer is recognized by God. Even if we are pitifully dumb, or if our tongues are overlaid with vanity or deceit, our meager syllables of praise are acceptable to Him, and He showers us with strengthening manifestations of His love. Today, as never before, prayer is a binding necessity in the lives of men and nations. The lack of emphasis on the religious sense has brought the world to the edge of destruction. Our deepest source of power and perfection has been left miserably undeveloped. Prayer, the basic exercise of the Spirit, must be actively practiced in our private lives. The neglected soul of man must be made strong enough to assert itself once more. For if the power of prayer is again released and used in the lives of common men and women, if the Spirit declares its aims clearly and boldly, there is yet hope that our prayers for a better world will be answered. Quoted by permission from the Reader's Digest. 2. Definiteness of purpose. Here one must understand the full significance of Andrew Carnegie's emphasis on the relationship of perfect harmony between all the minds of a mastermind group. Lack of harmony on the part of one individual of the group will destroy the controlled attention feature of the alliance. It is obvious, therefore, that controlled attention is more easily attained by an individual than it is by a group of individuals, because of the difficulty in bringing together a group of people all of whom will subordinate their personal desires and motives for the attainment of a common end. The Mormon people accomplished this end, but they were inspired to do so by one of the strongest of all motives, the desire for self-preservation. It is very easy for one to subordinate his personal desires for the good of his associates when his very life depends upon mutual coordination of effort, in spirit as well as in deed. Mr. Carnegie has called attention, time and again, to the necessity of perfect harmony in a mastermind alliance. His genius in maintaining that relationship between the members of his mastermind group and himself was the major secret of his stupendous achievements. He so arranged his relationship with his mastermind allies that all of them became wealthy far beyond anything they might have accomplished working independently, without his aid. Being the astute judge of human nature that he was, he recognized that men control their attention because of adequate motive, and for no other reason. He provided his mastermind allies with many motives for cooperating with him in a spirit of perfect harmony, not the least of these being the desire for financial gain. Sales managers who understand practical psychology often inspire their salesmen to exert extra effort by holding out to them extra compensation in the form of bonuses, prizes, personal privileges, etc. The more successful sales managers usually manage to have some sort of a system of extra compensation in operation all of the time, because experience has proved that this is the best known method of inducing men to take possession of their own minds and work toward a common end in a spirit of harmony. The sales manager of less experience often resorts to other methods for sales production results, such as holding his salesmen in fear of the loss of their jobs. Such methods sometimes produce temporary results that seem to be satisfactory, but they are only temporary. Permanent success in any sort of human relationship must be founded on mutual confidence and the spirit of harmony. Human relationships based on any other foundation are destined to fail, no matter what may be the nature of the relationship, or for what purpose it is formed. Let us all remember this, with profit. The world is now passing through an emergency when most of the people seem to have overlooked the importance of harmonious human relationships. There can be no harmony of human relationships in a world that is dominated by selfishness, greed, envy, revenge, hatred, lust, avarice, fear, doubt, indecision, and the desire for something for nothing, which are so evident throughout the world today. There can be no peace of mind or permanent success for the individual who is dominated by any of these negative states of mind. Controlled attention is one of the major principles by which all negative states of mind may be eliminated. In a recent radio address, Pope Pius expressed the opinion that the world war is God's way of purging a sin-sick world of its sins. Common sense suggests that the people of the world, with exceptions, of course, have been relating themselves to one another, since the beginning of the First World War, in a manner deserving of correction. 3. Love. Here is a state of mind, a human emotion, which heads the entire list of all emotions for effectiveness in establishing harmonious relationships between people. Love is of the Spirit, it is of divine origin. If you wish to see controlled attention in operation in its highest form, observe the man and woman who have consolidated their interests in a spirit of love. Observe, also, how easily this state of mind clears the mind of all other thoughts. Where true love prevails, the presence of envy, greed, revenge, lust, selfishness, and the desire for something for nothing claim no part of the minds of the lovers. I am not referring to that form of sentimentalism known as puppy love, nor the emotion of sex which is often mistaken for love. I am speaking of that spiritual power which brings people together in a spirit of oneness, that relationship through which each person becomes, spiritually, a part of the other. Love is spiritual harmony between two people. The relationship is not confined to men and women. It is the sort of relationship that exists between people wherever the true spirit of Christianity prevails. It has nothing in common with dogma or creed. It is the highest form of human intercourse. Where it becomes the dominating factor in human relationships, harmony and understanding exist. It is controlled attention directed to a definiteness of purpose among people. He whom it affects recognizes, willingly, that he is his brother's keeper. It was this divine spirit of love which inspired the signers of the Declaration of Independence voluntarily and willingly to pawn their own lives in order that liberty might be the common privilege of their fellow men. Their motive had nothing of the nature of selfishness in it. It had no relationship to fear. It was the product of an enduring faith that was shared alike by 56 men who were so sure of the justice of their cause that they saw it triumphant, at the outset. Wherever men control their attention and direct it to a definite end, in this spirit, they avail themselves of a source of power which may successfully defy opposition. That sort of power never is used by despots, for it is an impossibility to use spiritual power destructively. Spiritual power builds, but never tears down. Controlled attention leads to mastery in any sort of endeavor, because it enables one to focus the powers of his mind upon a definite objective and keep it so directed, at will. Controlled attention is self-mastery of the highest order, for it is an accepted fact that the man who can control his own mind can control everything that gets in his way. The man who knows exactly what he wants, and who concentrates his attention upon getting it with the full backing of his will to win, usually is not disappointed. Nothing can defeat him except a stronger opposing will. That sort of concentrated effort finds a way to master obstacles which seem insurmountable. It was this sort of willpower that Harriet Beecher Stowe had in mind when she wrote, "When you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, until it seems as though you could not hold on a minute longer, never give up then, for that is just the place and time that the tide will turn." Yes, the tide seems always to turn in one's favor if one is determined to see that it does. The state of mind has a lot to do with the tide. Plato had in mind this same thought when he said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self, to be conquered by self is, of all things, the most shameful and vile." Every great philosopher who has given thought to the powers of the mind has discovered that the mind has within it qualities sufficient for every emergency. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow recognized the truth of this when he said, "An enlightened mind is not hoodwinked, it is not shut up in a gloomy prison till it thinks the walls of its own dungeon are the limits of the universe, and the reach of its own chain the outer verge of intelligence. While Longfellow did not try to explain the source of the mind's power, he definitely recognized the irresistible power of the mind, just as every deep thinker recognizes it. Parkman showed his understanding of the mind and particularly the power of a concentrated mind when he wrote, "He who would do some great thing in this short life must apply himself to work with such concentration of his forces as, to idle spectators, who live only to amuse themselves, looks like insanity." And Annie Besant expressed her deep and mature understanding of the power that is available through the mind when she said, "Knowledge is essential to conquest, only according to our ignorance are we helpless. Thought creates character. Character can dominate conditions. Will creates circumstances and environment." Thomas Fowell Buxton expressed a great truth in connection with the power of concentrated thought when he wrote, "The longer I live, the more deeply I am convinced that that which makes the difference between one man and another, between the weak and the powerful, the great and the insignificant, is energy, invincible determination, a purpose once formed and then death or victory." Every man who has triumphed over prolonged defeat will understand the meaning of Buxton's statement. Arnold Bennett expressed his understanding of mind power when he said, "The manner in which one single ray of light, one single precious hint, will clarify and energize the whole mental life of him who receives it, is among the most wonderful and heavenly of intellectual phenomena. I think it rather fine, this necessity for the tense bracing of the will before anything worth doing can be done. I feel it is the chief thing that differentiates men from the cat by the fire. Whenever one tunes in on the thoughts of men who really think, he discovers evidence of their recognition of the irresistible power of the mind when that power is organized and turned to a definite purpose." John Quincy Adams expressed his belief in the profound nature of the power of the mind in these words, "Courage and perseverance have a magic talisman before which difficulties disappear and obstacles vanish into air." Washington Irving expressed his respect for the powers of the mind when he said, "Great minds have purposes, others have wishes. Little minds are tamed and subdued by misfortune, but great minds rise above them." Yes, that is true. Great minds do rise above misfortunes, and let us not forget that one of the qualities which make a great mind is that of definiteness of purpose backed by concentration of effort. John Foster expressed a great truth concerning the influence of a positive mind that is backed by determination, when he said, "When a firm, decisive spirit is recognized, it is curious to see how the space clears around a man and leaves him room and freedom. I have observed the truth of this, many times, by watching a determined man who knew where he was going, as he walked down the street. I have actually seen people look back over their shoulders, become confused, and quickly sidestep out of his way. The determined mind projects an influence that is felt by everyone within its range. You can recognize that sort of mind the moment one who possesses it walks into a room that is crowded by people, even though you may not actually see the man. His presence makes itself felt." Ralph Waldo Emerson disclosed his profound understanding of the power of thought in these words. "The key to every man is his thought. Beware when the great God lets loose a thinker on this planet." I take you, now, to Mr. Carnegie's analysis of this concept, but I wish to remind you that the method by which the habit of controlled attention can best be developed has been described in the first portion of this chapter. Mr. Carnegie's analysis will deal mainly with the effects of controlled attention, rather than the method by which this desirable habit may be acquired. Lincoln's mind was like a piece of steel, very hard to scratch anything on it and almost impossible, after you get it on, to rub it out. Thomas A. Edison became the world's greatest inventor, with practically no schooling, solely by learning to concentrate his full attention on one thing at a time. Man is not a creature of circumstances, but a creator of circumstances. He makes his own circumstances, his own opportunities. How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill. Andrew Carnegie's analysis of controlled attention. The analysis begins in Mr. Carnegie's private study in 1908 when I first met and interviewed him. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, will you describe how controlled attention can be applied in the practical affairs of life? Carnegie. Now let us define the term, controlled attention, and make sure we understand exactly what it means. It is the act of combining all the faculties of the mind and concentrating them upon the attainment of a definite purpose. The time involved in the act of concentration of thought on a given subject depends upon the nature of the subject and upon that which one expects in connection with it. Take my own case, for example. The dominating forces of my mind are, and have been for many years, concentrated upon the making and the marketing of steel. I have others allied with me who likewise concentrate their dominating thoughts upon the same objective. Thus we have the benefit of controlled attention in collective form, consisting, as it does, of the individual mind power of a great number of people, all working toward the same end, in a spirit of harmony. Hill. Could you not have carried on other business activities just as successfully as you conducted the steel industry, and at the same time? Wouldn't the mastermind principle have made this possible? Carnegie. Yes, I have known men to conduct many separate, unrelated businesses successfully, with the aid of the mastermind, but I have always believed they would have done much better had they confined their efforts entirely to one line of business. Splitting one's attention has the effect of dividing one's powers. The best plan for anyone to follow is to devote all his energies to some specific field. This concentration enables one to specialize in that field. Hill. But, what about the doctors who engage in general practice? Do they not have a better opportunity to add to their income than those who specialize in one particular branch of medicine? Carnegie. No, the exact opposite is true. If you ever have occasion to engage a specialist to remove your appendix, as I have had, you will learn that specialization in medicine pays. When I was a small boy, the old family physician who used to look after the health of the people of our neighborhood would have removed an appendix for $25, and I suspect he could have done the job about as well as the specialist who charged me more than 10 times that amount. But, I called in the specialist just the same. Hill. Does this same rule apply in the field of retail merchandising? Carnegie. Yes, it applies in every line of business and every calling. Modern merchandising has practically made the old-fashioned general store obsolete. While the most prosperous stores are departmentalized, they are not the same as the old general merchandise stores, because each department is managed by a specialist who devotes all his time to that department. You might say that a modern department store is nothing but a group of highly specialized stores, all operating under one roof and one general overhead, but possessing increased buying power that gives the store a tremendous advantage over smaller stores. Hill. You would say, then, that the department store is managed under the principle of controlled attention? Carnegie. That and other principles of the philosophy of individual achievement, especially the mastermind principle and definiteness of purpose. Hill. What about the banking business? Is it managed, also, by application of the principle of controlled attention? Carnegie. Very much so. Every department of a large bank, and practically every individual position in each department, is highly specialized. The same is true of railroading. Practically every position in the railroad business is specialized. Promotions are from the bottom upward, and the men holding the more responsible positions have had training in nearly all the subordinate positions, but they never undertake to hold two jobs at the same time. It is the same in the steel industry. Men become highly skilled by confining their efforts to specialized work. Here, too, promotions are from the bottom upward. All of our headmen have served their apprenticeship in subordinate jobs in the operating end of the business. Hill. You believe, then, that the better opportunities of the future will be available to those who concentrate their efforts along some specialized lines? Carnegie. It has always been that way and it always will be. Hill. What about the profession of teaching? Is it not possible for a teacher to prepare himself to teach many different subjects? Carnegie. Oh, yes, it is possible, but not advisable. The big universities are nothing but a group of associated colleges, each specializing in some particular branch of education. If it were practical for a teacher to do better work by devoting his efforts to a diversity of subjects, the universities would have discovered this long ago. Hill. What about the student who is preparing himself for a life work? Should he specialize in some particular branch of education? Carnegie. Yes, if he knows what his definite major purpose in life is to be. Otherwise he should confine his efforts to a general educational course until such time as he chooses a goal. Then he should continue his education through specialized training. The lawyer, for example, usually takes a course in general education, and then specializes in law. The doctor usually does likewise. General education gives one an approach to organized thinking, self-discipline, and self-reliance, all essential qualities for success in any calling. Hill. What about the stenographer? Should he or she concentrate on one line of work? Carnegie. Well, the stenographer must specialize, obviously, before procuring a position. After that he may have to engage in general service for a time, but the stenographer who does not wish to remain in that sort of work takes stock of his opportunities while engaged in general office work, and sooner or later specializes in some particular department through which he can promote himself to a better position. Many of the more successful business and industrial leaders of our times got their start through stenographic positions, where they had an opportunity to study the methods of their superiors. This is among the finest of all types of office work as far as preparation for executive responsibilities is concerned. The stenographer literally goes to a school taught by highly skilled executives and is paid for doing so. Hill. What about the farmer? Should he specialize, also? Carnegie. Yes, he should, but usually he does not. This is one of the major weaknesses of agriculture. The men who are making the most money from the soil are those who specialize in certain crops, such as wheat, rye, barley, and corn. The farmer who raises a little of everything very seldom receives much for anything he raises. Hill. What about the bookkeeper? Should he specialize, too? Carnegie. Yes, unless he is contented to remain always a bookkeeper, and even then he will make more from his work if he specializes in a particular branch of accounting. The better paid men in this field usually branch out from general bookkeeping to auditing and the installation of accounting systems. A clever man in this field finds it quite profitable, for every business beyond the one-man size needs dependable records of its transactions. The jack of all trades usually is good at none. There is some part that everyone can take in the scheme of affairs, some part through which he can render useful service and gain his just compensation. It is everyone's responsibility to find out what this part is, and to prepare himself for it. All well-ordered life requires preparation. Before one begins to prepare, he should know for what he is preparing himself. That, within itself, is concentration of effort. The man who has no definite purpose in life, who cannot do some one thing and do it well, is like a dry leaf on the bosom of the wind. He will be tossed here and there, wherever the winds of chance carry him, but, like the rolling stone, he will gather no moss. Unfortunately, the majority of people spend their lives in thus rolling. Hill. Do you mean that a man should choose his definite major purpose before beginning his education, and prepare himself to specialize in connection with that aim? Carnegie. No, not always. Seldom is a very youthful person, who has not finished his basic education, in a position to adopt a definite major purpose. In that case he should complete his essential education, through the grades in high school. If he still is unable to choose a major purpose in life he should either go to work and learn, from experience, of the possibilities of different occupations, or go to college and take a general liberal arts educational course. After that one should be able to decide what calling he wishes to follow. Hill. Suppose a person chooses a definite major purpose, but finds, after he pursues it for a while, that he dislikes it, or he finds something he likes better. Should he make a change? Carnegie. Yes, by all means. A man will succeed best in that which he likes best, all else being equal. It is advisable for one to change, provided he does not get into the habit of changing every time the work he has chosen becomes difficult, or he meets with temporary defeat. Changing from one line of work to another involves a tremendous loss. It is something like an industrial plant, the management of which changes from one product to another. The successful person must reach the stage of specialization, sooner or later, the sooner, the better. Hill. Is it advisable for a businessman to engage in politics? Carnegie. Not if he wishes to succeed in business. Politics is a profession unto itself, and not a very dependable one at that. But it is a profession, and those who succeed best at it are those who do nothing else. Hill. What sort of career would you advise a young man to choose? A professional career or a business career? Carnegie. That depends upon the young man, his likes and dislikes, his native ability, his physical conditions, etc. Generally speaking, I would say that business and industry offer much broader opportunities than do the professions, because the professions are overcrowded already. This is essentially an industrial nation. Industry is the backbone of our economic structure. And I have never seen the time when a reliable, loyal, and capable man could not find his place in industry. Here is where most of the larger fortunes are made, which, within itself, partly answers your question, since most people choose a career with the object of earning a living and accumulating as much wealth as possible. There always has been a shortage of capable men at the head of industry, but never a shortage in the professions. Hill. What about the Army, or the Navy, or the government service as a career? Are there desirable opportunities in any of these three branches of service? Carnegie. Again, I must say that this depends very largely on the person who is choosing the career. If a man wishes an opportunity to engage in a creative effort, he would not choose the government service as career, since his chances there would become a matter of the whims of politicians. He would fare better in either the Army or the Navy, since these are somewhat further removed from political influence. Some have made commendable records in both of these fields of the service, but generally they were men who liked that sort of life. The line of promotion in both the Army and the Navy is rather long and by no means easy. Military service calls for concentrated effort and a definite limitation of ambition, as the possibilities of advancement are known in advance. Some men are not suited, by nature, to limit themselves in this manner. They prefer to take their chances in business or industry, where the risks may be greater and the work harder, but the possibilities of achievement are without any fixed limits. Hill. Then you recommend concentration of effort, through specialization, in all callings? You believe, obviously, in a one-track mind? Carnegie. Specialization, through concentration of effort, gives one greater power. It saves lost motion in both thought and physical action. It harmonizes with the principle of definiteness of purpose, the starting point of all achievement. I believe in a one-track mind if you allow me to describe it this way, a wide range of knowledge based on facts related to one's major purpose, but expressed through organized plans for the attainment of that purpose. I might make my meaning better understood if I stated it this way: a man should have a multiple-track mind for the accumulation of knowledge, but a single-track mind for the expression of that knowledge, which is about the same as saying that one should have a reserve of both general and specific knowledge, but he should concentrate its use upon the attainment of a definite major purpose. Knowledge gives one no power until it is organized and expressed in action. That requires concentration of effort. A man may be a walking encyclopedia of general knowledge, and I have known such people, but his knowledge will be practically useless until he organizes it and gives it some form of expression, through definiteness of purpose. Now, if you wish an excellent example of the power of controlled attention, I'll give you one. You are a young man, with most of your life ahead of you. Sooner or later, no doubt, you will give some thought to marriage, but before you make a choice you may look around considerably, analyzing many suspects, before you find an acceptable prospect for marriage. When you find one whom you believe to be your choice, observe how quickly and definitely you will begin to concentrate your attention upon this one woman. There's the time and the place to watch your step, for concentration of effort leads to climax of action, and this applies not only in the choice of a mate in marriage, but in all other human relationships. Concentration of attention leads to lasting friendships, and permanent business alliances, and to other permanent relationships. It leads to repeated successes, and over time, success consciousness becomes a habit. Hill. You speak of success consciousness as becoming a habit. I have observed that most people have a failure consciousness. How is this habit acquired? Carnegie. By the same method that the success consciousness is acquired, the concentration of attention upon failure and habits that lead to failure. Such habits, for example, as procrastination, fear, indecision, and indifference to opportunity. Through the principle of autosuggestion, one's dominating thoughts and physical habits become a fixed part of one's permanent character. Concentration of thought on any subject attracts to one the circumstances by which the physical counterpart of the thought is created. Hill. And it is by this means that thought becomes transformed into physical things. Carnegie. I would state it slightly differently. It is by this means that thought attracts one to its physical counterpart. Thought does not actually become transformed into material things, or at least we have no substantial evidence that it does, but thought does attract some combination of circumstances by which its physical counterpart is assembled or drawn to one. And it does this by the aid of whatever natural means are available. For example, definiteness of purpose inspires one to engage in physical action in carrying out the object of that purpose. Thus, while thought did not actually attract the physical counterpart of the purpose, it inspired the individual to procure it, through the most logical means available. Hill. Then there is no mystery connected with your statement that one's dominating thoughts tend to clothe themselves in their physical counterpart. Carnegie. None whatsoever. The method by which this takes place is as understandable as the multiplication table or the rules of grammar. Hill. But there are schools of thought whose followers would have one believe that one's dominating thoughts, such as one engages in when praying, can attract their physical counterpart through some inexplicable mystery, or supernatural law. Carnegie. Well, they could be right about this, but I have never knowingly acquired any desirable results from thought, through any means that I could not explain by the laws of nature and the rules of ordinary human relationship. I have never depended upon supernatural law, for truthfully I know of no such law. I will say this, however, the circumstances through which definiteness of purpose attracts opportunities favorable to the realization of the purpose often are so unexpected that they appear inexplicable. I suspect, however, that accurate analysis would disclose that there is a perfectly logical and purely natural cause for every effect. Sometimes the effects of certain experiences of our lives are so far removed from the actual cause that we completely lose sight of the cause. I will give you a splendid example of what I mean. Some years ago I called in a young man who had been serving as the secretary to one of our executives, and, with very little explanation, promoted him to a very responsible executive position, at a big increase in salary. He was so surprised that he told one of his friends that the promotion was a miracle. Well, it may have seemed like a miracle to him, but let me tell you what caused it. That young man had acquired certain desirable habits which made him more valuable in a higher position. For example, he arrived at his work a half hour earlier than the rules of his department required, and did not quit work for an hour or more after the others in his department had gone home for the day. On many occasions he came back at night, when there was extra work to be done. No one asked him to do this. He was not given extra pay for doing it. But, he moved entirely on his own initiative, thus advertising to the management that he possessed initiative of a high order. Now, remember that personal initiative is a rare quality, and it is one of the major essentials of those who assume the responsibility of leadership in any calling. Well, the habit of going the extra mile was the first quality that attracted our attention to this young man. After he had come to our attention in this favorable light, we also observed that he had the habit of doing his work more neatly and thoroughly than others who were engaged in similar work. Then we noticed that he had an abundance of enthusiasm through which he inspired those around him to work in the right sort of mental attitude. We sent out an investigator and discovered that he was taking a night course in engineering, thus proving that he had definiteness of purpose. The investigator discovered, also, that this young man's home life was pleasant and he was popular with the neighbors, thus proving that he had an attractive personality. Now, in view of these discoveries, do you see anything in connection with his promotion that savored of the supernatural, or the miraculous? Yet, these are the sort of miracles which enable some to get ahead while others around them, who have just as much education and as much knowledge of their work, fail to get ahead. We promoted this young man because, by his own habits, his own mental attitude and self-discipline, he had earned the right to promotion. When the promotion came, it came as the result of the natural cause of promotions. Perhaps the promotion seemed like a miracle to him because it came before he had planned it. And that is another queer thing about men who prepare themselves for the better things of life. The better things have a way of appearing before they are expected. Hill. And you believe that it is through similar circumstances that all men who succeed attain their success? Carnegie. I am sure of it. I have had the privilege of promoting as many men as has any other industrialist in America, if not in fact more. I have carefully analyzed the cause of every promotion I have made, and I can state definitely that every such promotion was earned well in advance by the person who was promoted. The only part one took in the transaction was to discover those who had earned promotions, and generally speaking I did not have to spend much time in this direction, because men who prepare themselves for promotion develop habits which are so obvious that they cannot be overlooked by an intelligent employer who, if he succeeds, must be eternally on the lookout for men who are capable of assuming responsibilities. You may think that a promotion is a great favor to the one promoted, but let me tell you that it is no greater favor to him than it is to the man who does the promoting, provided he picks the man who is entitled to promotion. But, in final analysis, all just promotions are self-acquired, through self-discipline, training, and preparation. Hill. You do not believe, then, that chance or luck favors one under such circumstances? Carnegie. Only to this extent. It sometimes happens that the time of a man's promotion is the result of some form of luck or chance, such as the death of a person to whose position he is promoted, or an emergency calling for some special form of talent which the promoted person possesses, but the luck is related only to the time. Such a person who is entitled to promotion will get it sooner or later, luck or no luck, because every man gravitates to the place in life where he belongs, by preparation and acquired habit, as naturally as water flows downhill. Nothing can change this, no matter by what name one calls the circumstance. He can call it luck, or a fortunate break, or whatever he pleases, but let me tell you that the only sort of luck any man can depend upon is that which he provides for himself, through painstaking preparation for whatever he desires in life. Hill. Your analysis indicates that controlled attention is an important feature in one's preparation for promotion, or the attainment of any definite purpose. Carnegie. Yes, an indispensable feature, you might say. It is impossible for a man to develop the habit of self-discipline, so necessary as a means of preparation for the attainment of a definite purpose, without concentration of his attention. He should practice this art until it becomes a habit. The place to begin is with the small details of one's daily work, where one has a definite motive for concentration of his attention. If one slights the minor details of his work, he will be sure to slight the more important features. Thoroughness, through concentrated attention, is a virtue of priceless value. Hill. But, is it not true, Mr. Carnegie, that busy executives do not spend their time in managing minor details connected with their responsibilities? Carnegie. Yes, that is true, but you overlook one important fact. The successful executive usually attains his position by having first acquired the art of mastering details. If he remains a successful executive, he must continue to be the master of details, but he usually relegates minor details to subordinates who act for him. Thus, by the use of the mastermind principle, he continues to attend to all necessary details. A man is paid for that which he does or that which he can influence others to do. The able executive is the man who has so related himself to others that he can increase their efficiency, thereby adding to his own. The man who is clever at getting work done, and done well, by others is worth much more than the man who does it. But, he must know details. If he doesn't, he will not know how to relegate details to subordinates. Hill. Does controlled attention bring other benefits than those which are available from its application in human relationships such as you have mentioned? Carnegie. Yes, many of them. Let us name a few of the major benefits. First, controlled attention is the means by which an individual gains control over the faculties of his own mind, through self-discipline. That is important enough to justify all the time one might put into developing the habit of concentration, but there are other advantages. It is the major means by which all voluntary habits are developed. It is also the means by which one may eliminate undesirable habits. It can be used to clear the mind of fear and doubt, thus preparing the way for the exercise of faith. It is the medium by which the mind may be cleared for prayer, for concentration on a definite desire, in a spirit of faith, is prayer. All these are benefits an individual may enjoy, through the application of concentrated attention, without contact with anyone. Hill. It seems, from your analysis, that controlled attention is associated, in one way or another, with every function of both the body and the mind. Carnegie. That is true. You might well have said it is associated with every function of the mind and the body, and every important human relationship as well. You should observe, also, that controlled attention is a degree of self-hypnosis, through which a man can prepare his mind for any reality he has to meet in life. Intense concentration of thought gives one the benefit of the power of that strange state of mind known as hypnotism. Some have used this power effectively in curing certain forms of disease. It can be used to master sorrow and grief and disappointment, where it is applied in conjunction with the power of the will. Hill. Isn't controlled attention always the result of the use of the faculty of the will? Carnegie. No, it may be applied through either the faculty of the emotions or the faculty of the will. It may also be applied through a combination of both the emotions and the will. When it is applied by the power of will, it becomes the master of the emotions. Hill. And that is the means by which one may place all emotions under the control of the will. Carnegie. Correct. Intense concentration of the attention upon a given subject, through the aid of the will, leaves the emotions no means of expression. The order can be reversed, as it generally is, and the mind may be so intensely concentrated on a given subject, with the aid of the emotions, that the faculty of the will becomes powerless to operate. The choice between the emotions and the will, in any given instance, is with the individual. Hill. Which is the safer choice, the emotions or the will? Carnegie. The will is safer, provided it is applied in conjunction with the faculty of reason and the conscience. The emotions and reason often disagree. That is one thing that causes trouble for so many people. They allow their emotions to have full sway, without the modifying influence of the reason. The person who has developed a high degree of self-discipline has the power to give expression to either his will or his emotions, or to subdue one in favor of the other, as he chooses. This is the ideal attainment in self-control. Hill. From all you have said I deduce that the sort of thought power which lifts one above the ordinary limitations of fear and sorrow and discouragement is that which one attains only by controlled attention, backed by definiteness of purpose. Perhaps the leaders who rise above mediocrity and make high places for themselves, in their chosen calling, are those who have acquired the habit of concentrated effort. Carnegie. Yes, and the best evidence that this is true may be found in the fact that the more successful people of the world, from as far back as we have any records of human achievement, have always been one-idea people. That is, they have acquired an obsession for the attainment of some single purpose, and they have concentrated the major portion of their time and thought upon that subject. It is often a mistake to assume that the term one-track mind is an epithet, for it may connote distinguished honor, instead. When asked by a friend what he believed to be the greatest human problem, a distinguished philosopher replied, "The greatest problem? Why, the greatest problem by which anyone is confronted is that of learning how to concentrate his thought power on his problems until he burns a hole through them." With that statement I fully agree. It has always been a source of astonishment to me, why so many people waste enough energy worrying about problems when it could enable them to find a solution, if the energy were concentrated upon that definite end. Hill. Do people who have a definite major purpose in life, and devote their time to its attainment, worry over problems the same as those without such a purpose? Carnegie, no, they do not. Definiteness of purpose, backed by a plan for its attainment, tends to conserve one's energies for the sole purpose of attaining that purpose. Worry is the brainchild of the man who is not definite. The very moment one decides what action he is going to take in connection with any problem, and begins to carry out his decision, he usually ceases to waste any of his energies worrying over it. Hill. Action must accompany decision, however. Decision, without physical action, may still leave one room for worry. Carnegie. You have the idea correctly. One of the greatest of all forms of concentrated action is that of intense effort, behind a definite purpose, commonly known as work. I have known this to correct physical ailments, and it is the world's finest formula for mental disturbances. Most so-called bad dispositions could be cured through a stiff workout in some sort of physical labor sufficient to work up a good sweat. Analyze a busy man, in whatever calling you choose, and observe how very little time he wastes over worries. And, if he happens to be a man who has acquired an understanding of the power of concentrated effort, through the coordination of thought and physical action, you will find him spending not 1 second on worries. But you will find that he makes decisions definitely and promptly, moves on his own initiative, without supervision or urge from others, has an abundance of enthusiasm, has confidence in himself and faith sufficient to drive him forward in the pursuit of the object of his purpose. Hill. Yes, I see now why you say that controlled attention is the master key that unlocks the doors to the solution of many problems on the one hand, and unlocks the doors to greater opportunities on the other hand. Carnegie. That states the matter very clearly. It might also be stated this way: controlled attention locks the doors behind things we do not want and opens the door to the things we do want. Therefore, it is a master key in fact as well as in theory. Hill. Would it be correct to say that controlled attention becomes a master key that locks the doors against things one does not want and opens the doors of opportunity to things one does want, because it conditions the mind for that state of mind known as faith? Carnegie. That would be literally correct, but controlled attention does more than prepare the way for faith, it inspires physical action back of one's faith. It also inspires other success qualities, such as enthusiasm, initiative, self-discipline, definiteness of purpose, creative vision, and organized thought. Controlled attention magnetizes the brain with the nature of one's dominating thoughts, aims, and purposes, thus causing one to be always in search of every necessary thing that is related to one's dominating thoughts. For example, let us say that a man makes up his mind to find a more responsible and better paying position. From the moment that he reaches a decision in his mind to find such a position, he will find himself searching the help wanted columns of the newspapers, and making inquiries among friends. His imagination will become keener and he will begin to devise ways and means of finding what he desires. In proportion as he concentrates his mind on the subject will he extend the scope of his search, until he will eventually find that for which he is searching. It may come from a source he least expects, but careful analysis would be almost certain to prove that it came because of some physical action, or some spoken word on his part. Concentration on a definite purpose, in a spirit of enthusiasm, puts the subconscious mind to work on establishing ways and means of carrying out that purpose. I have heard experienced detectives say that rarely is a crime committed that cannot be solved by concentration of attention. Often there is no evidence whatsoever as to who the perpetrator of a crime was, but the seasoned detective can take hold of such a case and, by the simple process of asking questions among those who are familiar with the crime, very soon unearth clues that lead to the solution. Controlled attention is the detective's greatest aid in the solution of crime. As a matter of fact, many successful detectives have no other outstanding qualification in this field except keen power of observation and the power of intense concentration of their minds. If these two qualities are useful in the solution of crimes, and obviously they are equally helpful in the solution of other sorts of problems. Hill. Yes, I can see that alertness in observation might be as helpful in searching for hidden opportunities for self-advancement as it is in the detection of crime. How does one develop the power of alertness of observation? Carnegie. It is the result of habit based on motive. When a man adopts a definite major purpose and backs it with a strong motive for its attainment, he begins automatically to develop alertness of observation in connection with everything and everyone which may be even remotely associated with the attainment of that purpose. You see, motive magnetizes one's mind with a power that attracts everything which affects that motive. The policeman who walks a definite beat day after day will see much more of what goes on along his beat than will the average person who goes there only occasionally and has no particular reason for observing details in that neighborhood. It is said that an Indian warrior or hunter can track a man or an animal through a forest, although no tracks visible to the untrained person are in evidence. He has trained himself, through controlled attention, to observe details the untrained person never would recognize, and his motive is that of self-preservation. The Indian becomes alert in the observation of physical details of his environment because his living depends upon it. Follow the illustration on through and you will observe that most of the so-called self-made men have a keen imagination, initiative, self-reliance and perseverance, and this is due, in the main, to the fact that they were thrown on their own responsibility and forced to develop these qualities. They had a definite motive for the action which led to their success. A man without an obsessional motive is a man without power, or, if by chance he comes into power, he will not be able to hold it. Hill. Your illustration seems to suggest that motive may be an important factor in education. The teacher who can inspire the student with the strongest motive for learning might teach him more than the person who endeavored to force him to study because of fear of failure at examination time. Carnegie. You have laid your finger on one of the most important factors of pedagogy. And the same theory would apply, in the relationship between employer and employee, or parent and child. The best way to induce anyone to do anything is by the provision of a motive sufficient to attract his attention and arouse his desire. Take your own mission in life, as an example. Your definite major purpose is to organize and distribute a philosophy of individual achievement. While your job may seem formidable as to its scope and the time required in which to do it, yet you are fortunate in that distribution of the philosophy will appeal to people through practically all of the basic motives. There will be no need, therefore, to try to force its acceptance, because it offers a practical approach to the things all normal people want most, particularly these. 1. Material wealth. 2. Love. 3. Freedom of body and mind. 4. Desire for personal expression leading to fame. 5. Self-preservation. Anytime you can offer anyone anything that appeals to him through these 5 motives, you may be sure of its ready and willing acceptance. Here you have 5 of the strongest motives that move people to action, under the more important circumstances of life. Therefore, no teacher of this philosophy will ever find it necessary to penalize any student of the philosophy in order to influence him or her to study. The motive for study already exists in the minds of all normal adults. For this same reason, no student of the philosophy will find it difficult to concentrate his or her attention on the study of the philosophy. And, you see what an advantage this fact provides the student, because all habits are related to habits of a similar nature. The habit of controlled attention in connection with the study and application of this philosophy will develop other habits of concentration that will lead to a series of related motives associated with opulence and personal achievement. It is this peculiarity as to the multiplicity of motives that will induce people to master and apply this philosophy, and which enabled me to look ahead into the future and foresee that it will gather momentum and become a nationwide influence. In this fact you may find your major motive for devoting 20 years or more of temporarily profitless research to the organization of the philosophy, which you will be compelled to do before it will have been proved and accepted by the public. You, too, will move in response to the 5 motives I have mentioned, for your work offers reward through each of these. With this theory in mind, I am now prepared to tell you that the major portion of the remainder of your life will be devoted to the organization and the distribution of this philosophy. You have already become sufficiently interested in the job ahead of you to enable me to prophesy that you could no more quit your job before it has been finished than a fly could escape from a sheet of fly paper, but not for the same reason. You will stick because you will desire to do so. Your desire is based on at least 5 strong motives, therefore, you will have no difficulty in concentrating your attention on your job. But you would have plenty of difficulty in trying not to do so. Hill. And now, Mr. Carnegie, inasmuch as the philosophy of individual achievement is being organized to serve the people of the United States, will you analyze the opportunities for self-advancement under the American way of life, by explaining why concentrated effort is necessary for individual success under our economic system? Carnegie. Yes, but the analysis will have to be broken down into many subjects before the real reason for concentrated effort is clear. We have already explained why an individual must organize his thought power and concentrate it upon one thing at a time, for this is the way to individual self-mastery upon which personal power is based. Let us now turn our attention to the external circumstances with which an individual must deal in his struggle for the attainment of his definite major purpose, or for the attainment of a mere living if his ambition carries him no further. To begin with, let us observe that the American way of life is founded upon a system of government that was designed to consolidate the power of all the people in such a manner that it automatically provides every citizen with the utmost amount of liberty, personal freedom, and the privilege of marketing his talents, through his own initiative, in proportion to their value as a service to others. Here, then, we begin to see concentration of power on a scale such as does not exist anywhere else, concentration under a system that gives the humblest citizen more rights and privileges and greater opportunities for the accumulation of private wealth than were possessed by kings and potentates of the ages that have passed. Hill. The vast variety of opportunities for personal promotion and improvement that exist in the United States is the direct result of the power the people have concentrated in their form of government. Thus it is the application of concentrated effort, on a huge scale, which provides every individual with the privilege of concentrating upon work of his own choice. Carnegie. That states the matter perfectly. Concentration of the many provides the privilege of concentration by individuals. Thus concentrated power becomes a form of insurance against interference with personal rights and property rights, under the greatest system of human relationship known to the world. Now let us see what the people have done with the privilege they enjoy under this system, for here is where the greatest variety of personal opportunities exist. First, let us recognize that this is essentially an industrial country, the major business of which is the making and the distribution of useful articles. The manufacturing and the distribution are carried on by the people themselves, under an industrial management system known as free enterprise operating under the profit motive. It would not operate for the benefit of all under any other system, for there must be a motive to inspire action in all walks of life. We have a motive behind our industrial system which is elastic enough to provide everyone connected with it with the necessary inspiration for action based on his best efforts, since the system pays the individual according to his talents, education, experience, native ability, and ingenuity of mind. The system has no stopgaps on individual talent, but it has been so ingeniously designed that it encourages everyone to render the greatest service of which he is capable, knowing, in advance, that his remuneration will be in proportion to the service he renders. This system encourages the development of definiteness of purpose, personal initiative, self-reliance, enthusiasm, imagination, creative vision, organized thought, and the other success principles included in this philosophy. Now let us see, who owns American industry. We operate under a system of corporations in which the humblest person may own an interest according to his financial resources, and the larger corporations, such as the railroad companies, the steel industry, and the telephone and communication companies, are owned by a cross-section of the people representing almost every type of person in every calling who have invested their savings in the shares of these corporations. To make it convenient for the owners of the shares to acquire and sell their holdings in these shares, at will, we maintain a stock exchange where anyone may either sell or buy shares in almost any corporation that is listed as having the right to offer its shares to the public. Thus the ownership of the industries is so flexible that it never remains the same 2 days in succession. Here, again, we see concentration on a huge scale, the concentration of the savings of millions of men and women who own the shares of the corporations that operate industry. The shares in the well-managed corporations are so flexible that their owners may use them as collateral for borrowing money at banks in times of emergencies, without losing their interest in the corporation. Thus one may have his money invested in industry and still have the use of it for other purposes. The manpower that operates the industries is made up of men known as the management and others known as the workers, both of which groups may be also owners in the business or not, as they choose. Generally, however, a majority of the men who work in both of these groups own shares in the business for which they work. Thus they are, in a broader sense, working for themselves. This is another method of providing men with an appropriate motive for rendering useful service to the extent of their capacity, education, and experience. It is a practice in all the better managed corporations to leave the door of opportunity for individual promotions wide open to every worker. Thus no one need remain in a lowly position if he has ambition for a better position, or can develop such ability through his experience. The system of individual promotion is so efficient that many of the larger corporations have talent scouts constantly in search of men who have the ability for leadership. There always has been and perhaps there always will be a shortage of men in the management group, at the top. This condition provides the greatest of motives for the exercise of individual initiative, imagination, and alertness on the part of the workers. Never, in the history of mankind, has a more efficient system of human relationship in the field of economics been devised, for it obviously provides every person with an outlet for such talents as he may possess, and it goes much further by providing one with an adequate motive for improving his talents by studying special training courses. Hill. It would be correct, then, to say that advancement is rapid and sure for those who master and apply the principles of this philosophy. Carnegie. To be sure. That is the purpose of organizing the philosophy, to enable ambitious people to learn how to concentrate all their energies upon the attainment of whatever station in life they aspire to hold. Now, sum up all these factors I have mentioned and observe that I have been describing the American way of life, under which every individual may have the use and benefits of his share of the stupendous power of the United States, a power that has been developed by the concentration and harnessing of the people's combined wealth, talents, special abilities, and educational facilities. Hill. Can you think of any improvements in the American way of life, and our economic system, which you believe might add to the benefits it provides the individuals who participate in it? Carnegie. The system is the best that civilization has yet produced, and although it is subject to minor refinements, it is basically sound because it provides the utmost of personal liberty, rewards personal initiative, and encourages the utmost of personal ambition by providing every individual with an adequate motive for growth through useful service. The improvements should be in the method of operating the system, not in the system itself. Hill. That is only another way of saying that the improvements should be in individuals and not in the system. Carnegie. That's the exact idea I had in mind, and the major purpose of this philosophy is to help bring about improvements in individuals, so they may better enjoy the privileges of the American way of life by rendering greater service under the system. Hill. You believe, then, that one of the major improvements that an individual could make in himself is that of concentrating all his energies upon some definite major purpose associated with the American way of life. Carnegie. Yes, that is the purpose of my philosophy of American achievement. It is designed to give every individual the fullest possible benefit of the best that has been learned from the experience of the most successful men the American way of life has produced. The philosophy is a combination of the theory and the practice of sound fundamentals that harmonize with the American way of life. It not only explains what to do in order to achieve individual success, but it also describes how to do it. The entire philosophy is a highly concentrated presentation of the rules of human relationship that are known to be sound and workable because they have been tried and found efficient. Hill. What do you believe to be the greatest danger that may disrupt the human relationships under the American way of life? Carnegie. The greatest danger consists in the philosophy of a small minority of people with socialistic tendencies who wish to break up the power which has been concentrated for the benefit of the people, through the American way of life. These misguided people would have us believe it helpful to decentralize the power that has been accumulated through the consolidation of the money and the talents of the people, under our industrial system. Instead of our being permitted to pool our savings and use them as operating capital in the management of the corporations, as we now do, the socialists would have us destroy this consolidation of power by dividing it up among individuals, not recognizing the fallacy in the fact that no one individual would have enough capital to produce an automobile, or provide a transportation system such as the railroads, or build a home, or supply any of the other modern luxuries and necessities of life, such as we now enjoy under our present standard of living. Decentralizing the wealth of America would be about the same as decentralizing the power of the army, by giving every soldier the right to conduct himself independently of the others, thus leading to the destruction of the power that comes from concentrated effort. Hill. You believe, then, in concentration of power under a system that functions through chosen leaders? Carnegie. Yes, chosen leaders, not leaders who have assumed the power of leadership without the consent of those whom they lead. We have, in the American industrial system, the finest example of concentrated power that is administered through leaders chosen by those from whom the power is obtained. This is pure democracy in its finest working order. The power comes from concentration of the wealth and the personal services of those who operate industry. It is administered by leaders who are chosen by the owners of the operating capital, made up, as they are, of people of all walks of life, known as management. Here leaders are chosen on the basis of their qualifications for leadership, consisting of their education, experience, and native ability. If a mistake is made in choosing any individual leader, it can be corrected from the same source that the mistake is made. The system under which American industry is operated is similar to the system under which the government operates. The power of the United States, which is the envy of the world, consists of the coordination between our system of government and the other systems of our economic and industrial life, all of which constitute what we call the American way of life. Hill. What, in your opinion, Mr. Carnegie, is the greatest tangible virtue of that which you call the American way of life? Carnegie. Its greatest virtue consists in the fact that it provides all the people with the utmost personal liberty and the privilege of living their own lives in their own way, with the greatest opportunity for self-determination and the accumulation of individual wealth. Instead of penalizing personal ambition and individual desires, as is the case under many other systems that have been tried and are being tried in other countries, the American way of life places a premium on these human traits, by rewarding everyone in proportion to his contributions to society as a whole. Hill. One might say, then, that the American way of life is the world's most impressive demonstration of the power of concentration of human endeavor? Carnegie. That would be stating the facts correctly. Ours is the most powerful government of the world. Ours is the richest country of the world. Our people are the freest people of the world, and the richest as individuals. Our system of economics and our social systems provide the people with more luxury than any other people enjoy, and those of us who adjust our mental attitude to harmonize with the American way of life have more peace of mind than any other people of the world. Hill. Your advice to the American people, I assume, would be to let well enough alone, by making the most of the American way of life? Carnegie. Yes, my advice would be to let the American way of life alone as it is. Those who feel that improvements should be made in any portion of our economic or social system should begin the improvements they recommend by applying them in their own lives. If anyone thinks he can improve the American way of life, let him first demonstrate the soundness of his plan by making it work in his own life. Then the rest of us will be glad to adopt his system, if it proves to be better than our present system. Hill. In other words, you would recommend to those who wish to divide up the wealth equally, that they get together, form a colony of their own, and divide up their personal possessions. Then, after they prove that they can live better and be more prosperous and enjoy more of the luxuries of life than we possess, who believe in and adhere to the American way of life, we may be influenced to scrap our present system and adopt theirs. Carnegie. That's the idea. But I must call your attention to the fact that many such colonies have been tried already. So far not one of them has worked, and those who started the idea were forced to come back to our present system, where they could avail themselves of the benefits of the concentration of wealth and personal endeavor, under a democratic system of leadership. Hill. What was missing in those collective efforts, which prevented them from succeeding, Mr. Carnegie? It would appear that they were based on concentrated effort, through mutual consent of all concerned. Carnegie. Many essentials were missing. First, the profit motive, which causes individuals to exert their best efforts and act on their own initiative, was missing. Second, the spirit of self-determination was missing. Take away from a man his desire to become independent and you rob him of much of his initiative, enthusiasm, imagination, and self-discipline. When a man gives up his privilege of independence, he also gives up a proportionate amount of his enthusiasm and ambition. One of the most essential factors that was missing was the power that is acquired through the consolidation of a vast amount of wealth with an equally vast amount of manpower, such as we enjoy under the American way of life. Hill. I see what you mean. The socialist experiments have not worked because the individuals engaged in the movement lost the spirit of self-determination that is possessed by the man who moves on his own initiative, fixes his own habits of living, lives his own life, and engages in his choice of occupations. Carnegie. Well, that was partially the cause of their failure. The important fact I wish to emphasize is this: socialistic colonies have not succeeded, whereas the American way of life has succeeded. These effects we are familiar with. As to the cause we may disagree, but as to the effects there can be no disagreement, for the facts speak for themselves. Even where socialistic colonies have existed for a time, they have not found any method of providing their members with the luxuries of life that the average person enjoys under the American way of life. At most they have provided the scantiest sort of a living, under conditions which deprive the members of the privilege of personal initiative. Therefore, the members must have been deprived, also, of the peace of mind possessed by the man who lives his own life. Hill. Yet there have been many different systems of cooperative societies which seem to have worked pretty well, Mr. Carnegie. Carnegie. Now you are getting into an entirely different field. Cooperation is vastly different from socialism. The principle of cooperation is one of the principles of the philosophy of individual achievement, under the American way of life, but it has nothing in common with socialism. Cooperation brings benefits without the loss of individual initiative and the right of free enterprise. Cooperation does not deprive a man of the motive which inspires him to use his imagination, enthusiasm, and creative vision. Cooperation is a part of the great American way of life through which the material resources and the manpower are coordinated so as to produce the greater combined power that is available for the people of America. There is cooperation in socialistic colonies, but the right motive to produce enduring power is missing. Controlled attention, Napoleon, is essential to a democratic free enterprise system, and is discouraged, diminished, and ultimately absent in a socialist system. How to own your own mind. Close attention to the chapters of this book will permit the reader to learn what Mr. Carnegie taught me many years ago. One must recognize opportunity through creative vision, conceive how to capitalize on opportunity through organized thought, and control the mind's activities and direct them to a given end with controlled attention. You will then own your own mind and be ready to take necessary action to achieve your goal. You may have everything you desire if you desire it badly enough to inspire you to keep your mind fixed on its attainment. The human will can overcome any obstacle or any handicap, if a man has enough backbone to use it. That secret power from within, which has the answer to all problems, can be contacted through concentration of thought based on definiteness of purpose. When Thomas Jefferson decided to act, No unexpected obstacle could swerve him from his course, for he had considered carefully and well. You are the architect of your own career. Frank Channing Haddock.